It's an essay written from a college student. How bad could it be? Our first sample student essay, other than the ranging essays, is from a student actually took my class. This is called The Punks of Yesterday and Today. The things I want you to pay attention to and to know before we get started. The first thing is this is probably a rough draft. I have no idea if this student revised this paper or how much better it got because frankly I don't know who wrote the paper. I do my best to keep everything confidential, and that's really helped out by the fact that I have no memory for names whatsoever. The second thing you need to know is that while it might be fun picking apart a bad paper, and it's always an ego boost to know that hey, you can do better than this, there's a real point here. What we're trying to do is develop a critical perspective. If you can tear apart your own paper the way you can tear apart the punks of yesterday and today, you'll be able to fix everything before it goes wrong. So, these are the kind of mistakes that college students often make. Look, hopefully you looked for them when you went over the essay, and we're going to point some out now. And then the question you should be asking yourself is, am I doing any of this? But I bet you're writing better than this. So let's talk about the essay, The Punks of Today and Yesterday. Or is it The Punks of Yesterday and Today? Yeah, it all blurs together for me. We're going to take it sentence by sentence. I will warn you right now that this isn't exactly what I call a good essay. I've seen much worse, but this is one of the not good ones that you're going to get to see. You'll also see better essays, but we're going to take it sentence by sentence. I don't normally do sentence by sentence, but I think this first time around it will give you a pretty good idea of how to read a paper. When I read a paper, I'm going to be stupidly literal and stupidly critical. Stupidly literal means I'm not going to try to read anything into it. It doesn't matter if I can kind of figure out what they're talking about. That's not the way people read, particularly not the way people read this type of writing. Stupidly critical in that my job is to point out stuff that needs to be changed, stuff that's not working. I think it's important that everybody gets a good ego boost, and God knows I need them as often as humanly possible. But when it comes down to it, if I came and said, this is great, it doesn't give you a single thing to change or alter. By getting into the nitty gritty and being critical and not giving the reader the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to show the amount of stuff to change you can pull out. And the more of this stuff you can start to find on your own, the better off you're going to be. Because if you can read your stuff this critically before you turn it in, you're going to get a better grade. If you think everything's perfect, then nah, not so much. So, let's take it sentence by sentence. We live in a world where image is everything. This is a nice big broad one. We start off in first person plural. First, let's talk about that. If you use first person singular, I, you're writing your personal feelings down, and me, as the reader, I'm going to be like, so this is what you think. It kind of marks everything as opinion in that way. First person plural is making me assume that I'm exactly there with you. So I'm thinking about how the narrator and me relate. Are we really together? If you do second person, you're addressing the reader directly. And I'm going to be thinking, well, do I think that? I'm going to be interrogating my own beliefs. The problem with all of these is we're not talking about the subject. And that's where we need to be focusing. I say you go third person unless there's reason to do otherwise. Now, we live in a world where image is everything. What does that mean? image is the only thing that's important to the point of bleeding out everything else. This is a pretty broad claim. And when you get into broad claims, you're moving towards stuff that's harder and harder to prove. See if it improves. The beauty of Hollywood is the ideal image for men and women of today. What we see in magazines is what we must strive to be, and must people do try to be like society targeted stars. So, step by step, the beauty of Hollywood is the ideal image for men and women of today. So, whether you think about it or not, we have to be like people in Hollywood. Well, we're assuming that people in Hollywood means movie stars, but there's more than just movie stars in Hollywood. Is everybody the same age in Hollywood? These are broad categories, and the problem with broad categories is you can start to pull up exceptions endlessly. If you can pull up exceptions endlessly, it doesn't really work as a descriptor. Next part, what we see in movies and TV is what we must try to be. That means if this is the last magazine you read, you have to try to be a deer. Must people do try to be like society targeted stars? Well, first there's a proofreading issue, and I have a bit of a problem with that. And, the problem with proofreading issues is I expect you to make mistakes from time to time, but if you trust your word processor to pick out all the wrong things and don't do an extra read through for them on your own, it's going to look like you're not really paying attention. The media is a type of role model for whoever is watching, splice. It has a big impact on the world. There's a problem with media. Media is the plural of the word medium, which means a method for conveying information. When they say the media, read literally, they're talking about every single form of communication. Well, is radio the same as TV? Is TV the same as streaming? Is streaming the same as a newspaper? Do these all do the same kind of things? Obviously not. What they mean, and I'm not supposed to think this way, but what they mean is the stuff that comes out of Hollywood. It's the same generic thing that we saw at the beginning. But even if we were to limit ourselves to TV and movies, there's not a unified, cohesive image that comes out of those either. The media is a type of role model. How is the media a role model? It's kind of impossible if the media is really that diverse. For whoever is watching. If you watch it, you're going to have to do it, I guess. It has a big impact on the world. Much like a crater. As a society, we are unable to justify what normal is. Now, what I'm hoping is happening to you is you're doing because look what was said just a sentence before, and look what's said now. What we see in magazines is what we must strive to be. But then, a sentence or two later, it says we are unable to justify what normal is. Eh? There's a problem here. It is very much a logic issue. Because if we have to be like media, how is that not what we think normal is? Now, you and I know what they're saying is that there's a distinction between the Hollywood image and how we really think, but it's kind of confusing the way they lay it out to the point where I don't know if I can trust a reader to pull that out. Is normal rich or poor, big or small, straight or gay, black or white? What they're trying to get at here is, with all these variations, how can we find anything as normal? Well, the problem is, there is a normal, a society constructed normal. Do you see a lot of TV sitcoms about poor people? Do you see a lot of TV sitcoms about fat people? In the media, is it more favored to be straight or gay, or are they held on equal levels? Well, it's just within the last decade that that gays have had the right to get married. So there's been legal distinctions between them, and straight heterosexual has been seen as normal. Black or white, are they seen as the same thing? When we're talking in terms of class, there is very much a normal depiction that we see. Most shows on TV revolve around upper middle class people, very few poor people, very few working class people, even. In terms of race, there are drastically different concerns between the various groups out there. And if the Black Lives Matter bit didn't teach you that, I don't know what would. So their sentence is working against them because they're trying to say that there is no such thing as normal because there's all these variations, but society clearly favors one. Yeah, they're trying to work out something about societal expectations versus how we really are, but they're doing more to confuse the realm than to clarify it. And that's a problem because we have to read stupidly literally and stupidly critically. There are a huge variety of subcultures in the United States, different people of different race, class, color, and even social groups in our society. Gee, doy, thanks. I never figured that out. Well, duh. Then we have this sentence. Who are we to declare that our normal is more normal than theirs? Who are we to say that they are not normal? Who are we to decide that they do not fit in with our imaginary norms? This is about one of the least academic statements that I can imagine. We're not even pretending to have objectivity here. And as a result, it doesn't sound like an academic writing. You know who it sounds like? A preacher. Someone is preaching the truth to you. Is that really appropriate for academic writing, though? In fact, what makes something normal? Is it the sheer fact that a simple majority of people believe something that makes it normal? One, you should be getting very tired of the ironic air quotes here. Two, the sheer fact. Proofreading can get to be funny. Is it the fact that simple majority of people believe something that makes it normal? Well, yeah, that's actually kind of the dictionary definition of normal, a societally constructed norm. If an overwhelming majority of people believes something, we think that makes it correct. And I'm really hoping alarm bells go off here for you because we have changed what we're talking about. One of these things is not like the other. We were talking about normal. This last sentence we moved into correct. Are they the same thing? What's the relationship between them? This writer is writing as if they're the same thing and moving from one to the other in hopes that we won't notice, but it does kind of undermine their argument. If you can recall the fact that before certain scientific and geological developments, the majority of people believed the world was flat, did that mean they were right? You see, we were talking about normal before, now we're talking about right. And the sentence should make you do something else. Can you remember when everybody thought the earth was flat? There are people who still think the earth is flat, but they're pretty much known as morons nowadays. It's clearly not a normal thought. The obvious answer is no. Well, if it's obvious, why are you having to tell us this? There's not one set in stone definition of normal, no standard for how human beings should present themselves, because it is entirely unfair to judge the way someone else decides to portray the image of who they are as not normal. If you have to stop and take a breath halfway through a sentence, there might be an issue at work there. But, well, there's also, if you have to say it's obvious, then why are you wasting all our time explaining it? There's also that they're moving, it's not just moving from normal to correct. We have also now talked about right. Now we're talking about fair. And these are all different concepts. Normal is a societal construction. Correct means right. Factually. Unfair ties to some other emotional value judgment. But you know what my main thought is at this point? There's something that we haven't mentioned yet, and that's the punks. None of this has anything to do with the punks so far. At least if there are connections, this writer hasn't told us what they are. And that's a problem because readers, you have to treat them as if they don't have that long of an attention span. If I get all the way through one page and I don't know what the subject is, I'm probably not going to pay a lot of attention to the rest of the paper. It's hard for me to do so when I don't know why I'm paying attention. When asked how he wanted society to portray him, my second friend, who is a friend of mine and a true fan of punk today, stated very bluntly, "I don't give a shit, I'm me." You just know that the writer of this essay was like, "Heh, I can use obscenities here. I can use obscenities." Also, there's a question of what does a true fan of punk today mean? How do we know this person is a true fan? 3, why are we talking about this person? Who the heck cares if your friend doesn't care? Is your friend an authority? We have no way of knowing. There are so many different variations of what people believe, what people wear, how people act. Duh. People that share similar beliefs tend to flock towards each other, like geese, I assume. And in time, if their beliefs are not deemed as normal by the general populace, they form their own little subculture in order to form a web of acceptance. Let's bit by bit flock together. Not good language choice. Populace? Who the hell uses the word populace? Now, we both know what's going on here. This person is using a word that they think makes them sound smart because it's a big word. In reality, though, using words to try to make yourself sound smart doesn't make you sound smart. It makes it look like you have to try to sound smart, which means it kind of makes you look dumb. It works against you in a lot of ways. Just to be clear, clarity is much better argumentatively. Okay. The web of acceptance. I think spiders are involved. In turn, our society gives their subculture a name. Really, societies don't name themselves. Subcultures don't name themselves, and even creates a stereotype of what their normal is. So someone in the subculture doesn't have anything to do with their image. One of the oldest of such subcultures has been given the name of punk. We'll ignore the fact that we're slipping into a passive verb here. Has been given by whom? Ugh. But punk is one of the oldest subcultures. That means there probably weren't many subcultures before punks, which started in like the mid 70s, the paper says. So that means you thought the hippies were a subculture? They're not. You thought the zoot suiters were a subculture? Well, not according to this paper, because subcultures didn't exist until the punks. You think flappers were a subculture? Again, subcultures didn't exist until before the punks. This is what this essay says. The punks of our society have been around for decades, and they have changed immensely. They have immensely changed over the year. This is what our thesis explicitly is. It's the end of the introduction. It has to be where the thesis is. In order to prove this, you would have to prove that punks have been around for decades, and that they're not the same. Which I think you could do with 2 pictures. There's a problem here. Because there's not a good argument here, I'm going to read the whole of this paper trying to figure out why they're telling us any of this stuff. I think there could be a good argument in here. There's definitely potential. When you're talking about a subculture and its relationship to the mainstream, there's lots of stuff to talk about there. However, we have to read it with a whole lot of forgiveness and interpretation to get that way. And we can't do that. We have to read stupidly literally because we can only go based on what they're saying here. So, this is not a good paper. Why did I give it to you then? One, it helps to let you know that you can indeed do better. And that was your first sample student essay. Did you enjoy it? Did you have fun? We will be going over a couple others. I think we have 3 other sample student essays, and they're all going to be a bit more advanced than this one. There are different issues that creep up. You probably noticed that we stopped at the introduction. I would say about 85% of the time, that's all you really need to read, because everything that's going wrong in the introduction is going to go wrong in the rest of the paper, too. The intro should actually be cleaner than the rest of the paper, since it's the first thing people read, and it should be the thing that most authors spend the most time on. I kind of doubt anyone spent much time on this one at all. It's another thing you should pick out from this, is that when someone goes into an essay without a plan, or doesn't leave themselves enough time to write, it's really obvious. That's why we try to push the writing process as we go along. But I know that you'll do better than this student. Comforting thought, huh? See you next video.